Mr. President.
The Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today with my colleague from Minnesota, Senator Smith, to honor two Minnesotans who were friends of ours who were taken from us this weekend in a shocking act of political violence. Representative Melissa Hortman, our former Speaker of the House, and her husband, Mark Hortman. I'm also continuing to pray for State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, Yvette, who survived a brutal assassination attempt. John took 9 bullets and Yvette took 8, and they are continuing to recover in the hospital. I've been in touch with Yvette, and she is grateful for the outpouring of support from all over the country for their family. And I want to extend my enormous gratitude to the hundreds and hundreds of local, state, and federal law enforcement who worked tirelessly over the course of a 43-hour manhunt to apprehend the suspect. They ran toward the danger. They risked their lives. And because of their bravery and diligence, our state was able to breathe a sigh of relief Sunday night, knowing that this man was no longer at large. The local officers from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, also stopped further assassinations, along with other officers, in the moment by going over to check on legislators after learning about what had happened at Senator Hoffman's house. We now know that the assassin went to 2 other legislators' home in between the 2 shootings that night, and in one case sped off after being spotted by the police. While it was too late to save Melissa and Mark, the officers' decision to check on their house allowed them to spot the assassin, separate him from his vehicle, and begin the manhunt. But right now, we want to focus on who Melissa and Mark were as people. They were great neighbors, wonderful friends, and great parents to their beloved children, Sophie and Colin. Melissa is someone that I wish the whole Senate and the whole nation knew. We treasured her in Minnesota. She was the epitome of what you want in a public servant. She went into it for all the right reasons. She grew up in Spring Lake Park in Andover, Minnesota, working at her family's used auto parts company in Blaine in the summers. After leaving for college, she came back to Minnesota for law school and began her career in our state. She was always devoted to her community. She was a Girl Scout leader and taught Sunday school at her local Catholic church. And she was always one of the first to raise her hand when someone needed a volunteer for, well, just about anything, including training service dogs for veterans. One of them, Gilbert, was just too friendly for service because he couldn't just focus on one person, and so their family adopted him and loved him very much. Sadly, he was shot that night, and the 2 children had to make the decision to put him down this weekend. How they love that dog. Melissa and I first ran for public office around the same time, both with little kids, me for county attorney's office, her for the state legislature. That's how I got to know her. I was the county attorney, she was running for legislature. We went door to door together, and it seemed like she knew everyone in the district already. She was elected in 2004 and served in the Minnesota House for 20 years, and she left a lasting impact. As a legislator, she authored legislation that created Minnesota's solar energy standard. As minority leader, she guided her caucus with conviction and a sense of humor, and she wasn't afraid to call out the all-male card game taking place during debates. When her colleagues chose to make her the speaker, her first order of business was getting rid of the speaker's mute button. As she said at the time, "I have a gavel, and a gavel is good enough for me." Melissa was one of the most consequential speakers in the history of our state. She knew no limits in terms of trying to get people together, trying to get things done. And while I cannot believe she is gone, Minnesotans will be feeling the impact of her leadership forever. When a Minnesota student gets a free school lunch, that's Melissa. When a Minnesota parent is able to take paid leave to spend those early, precious moments with a newborn, that's Melissa. When a Minnesota voter casts a ballot without facing unfair discrimination, that's Melissa. When a woman is able to access reproductive care in our state, that's Melissa. And when our state achieves 100% clean energy by 2040, that will be because of Melissa. And when we had a tied state house this year, it was Melissa who forged a power-sharing agreement and a budget with her Republican counterpart. She was a generational leader, and she led with integrity and with courage. She, like her husband Mark, who you see here, who also was accomplished in business and a kind person, they were compassionate and they were smart and they were just nice to everyone. And I can't believe they are gone. Here they are with their kids. The polarization in our country, the divisions, the online hate needs to stop. Violence has absolutely no place in our democracy. We need to come together and bring down the rhetoric. We must be united in the face of this attack. It was simply un-American. That's why the entire Minnesota delegation, Democrats and Republicans, including Senator Smith, including Congressman Emmer, came together over the weekend to call this violence out. We spoke with one voice to condemn it. And in our state, Melissa's colleagues on both sides of the aisle have done the same. We need to recognize the reality that there are unbalanced people out there, read things online, they believe them, they act on them. We have seen this too many times. There are many things we can do as a body to fix this problem, and I'm sure in the days to come we will offer legislation on security and all kinds of things. But we don't need to pass a law for people to turn down the rhetoric, to treat each other with decency and respect, to act a little more like Melissa and Mark. Mr. President, Melissa and Mark Hortman were the best of us. I am shattered to have lost them, but eternally grateful to have known them. I want to end by sharing a message from their beloved kids, Sophie and Colin. They wrote this just last night. This tragedy must become a moment for us to come together. Hold your loved ones a little closer, love your neighbors, treat each other with kindness and respect. The best way to honor our parents' memory, they said, is to do something, whether big or small, to make our community just a little better for someone else. I urge my colleagues to hear that message, and I'm honored to be here with my wonderful colleague, Senator Smith. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, many thanks to my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, for her heartfelt words. So I rise today because my friend Melissa Hortman, Speaker Emerita of the Minnesota State House, incredible person and strong leader, was shot and killed Saturday morning along with her husband Mark in a tragic, politically motivated attack. Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette were also shot a total of 17 times, and Yvette incredibly and selflessly used her own body to shield their daughter from the attacker. I thank God that they are expected to recover. I am filled with gratitude for the state and local and federal law enforcement that marshaled all of their resources to keep Minnesota safe after this horrendous attack and to mount the largest manhunt in the history of our state to capture this shooter late on Sunday evening. This was an unspeakable act of political violence, an act and an attack on our democracy, as well as a personal tragedy. And there will be a time and a place to discuss the evilness of Speaker Emerita Hortman's assassination, the forces that drove her assassination to violence, and how we as leaders must rise to this moment and speak with one voice to condemn violent political attacks. But today, I want my colleagues and America and everybody back home in Minnesota to know the kind of person and leader that Melissa was. And I want to think especially of Colin and Sophie, who have lost their parents, their mom and dad, and understand that they will not be forgotten by me or Senator Klobuchar or many, many thousands of people. I hope that everyone will be able to understand a little bit more keenly the depth of our grief, the human cost to the loss of Melissa and Mark's family and their friends and their community, and to Minnesota and to our nation. So, Mr. President, I don't know about you, but I need a little inspiration right now. And Melissa was inspirational. The first thing you need to know about Melissa was that she was a middle-class girl from the North Metro of the Twin Cities. She was funny, she was straightforward, and she was kind. She was smart and driven and determined, and she did well because she worked hard at everything that she did. From her first job making burritos to her last job leading her caucus through a deeply divided legislative session. Nothing was handed to her, and she earned it through her work. And that is the inspiration of the American dream. The second thing that I want you to know about Melissa is that she believed and acted on one of our most American of values, the conviction that we all have a responsibility to one another. We have a responsibility to contribute to our communities, and we have this unshakable belief that our country is great because we feel that connection and that obligation to one another. Service to and respect for others was the guiding principle in Melissa's life. Over the last few days, there have been so many beautiful tributes written to Melissa's life and work, and I see a common thread in all of these remembrances, that even in the rough business of politics, she was someone who never lost focus on our shared humanity, those shared values, and that shared goal that we should all have in public service, which is improving life for Americans. And her gift for focusing on that shared humanity helped her not only to earn the deep loyalty of the members of her own caucus, but also the trust and respect of Republicans on the other side of the aisle. Current House Speaker, Republican Lisa Damuth, recently recalled how Melissa reached out to her at the start of Lisa's leadership. Melissa was the Speaker of the House, and Lisa was coming into leadership, and how she came to view Melissa as a mentor to her leadership. Many disagreements on policy, but Melissa was a mentor to her because she brought such clarity and honesty and compassion to their working relationship. And former Senate Majority Leader, Republican Paul Gazelka, reflected on his years of working closely with Melissa, and he noted that they had built a deep trust with one another because of her honesty, because of her even-keeled temperament, even though she was a very tough negotiator. He remembered their moment of human connection as they shared a hug after the passage of a landmark public safety bill and the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. And in recognition of that hug was in recognition of how they had worked so hard, coming from different places in such a difficult moment for Minnesota. So Melissa always approached her work by leading with compassion and respect for our shared humanity, and of course, she was unafraid to demand that respect in return, both for herself and for others. I mean, she was fearless. One of the most famous anecdotes of her speakership is, Amy was referring to this. One night, it was a long night, colleagues in this room can relate to it, it was a long night, the debate was going on, but there were members of the House that were making important speeches, making personal speeches about the impact of a bill that would have increased criminal penalties in certain protests. And meanwhile, there was a group of male legislators in the back room that were playing cards. And Melissa called them out on this. And these legislators, unaccustomed, I think, to being confronted with their rude behavior, expressed their indignation. And Melissa's response was pretty simple. She said, "You know, I am really tired of watching women, and especially women of color, be ignored." So she said, "I'm not sorry." Mr. President, I have to tell you that sorry, not sorry became a little bit of a rallying cry around the Minnesota State Capitol after that, and something that we all remembered Melissa for. She lived her values, and she knew how to stand up for others and insisted that we all treat one another with dignity and respect as we undertake the serious work of public service, even in a political climate that too often rewards meanness and sort of a dehumanizing of one another. But here's the third thing I want everyone to know about Melissa Hortman. She was a formidable legislator. Melissa's tenure of public service began long before her election to the Minnesota legislature. She was an intern in this very body for then Senators Al Gore and John Kerry. And after law school, she served as a clerk in our state's court system, and then as an assistant Hennepin County attorney. She first rose to prominence winning a housing discrimination case as a legal aid attorney. She won for her client. What she won for her client was, at the time, the largest civil award in Minnesota history for housing discrimination, and she was 27 years old. She volunteered on campaigns. She ran for office twice, losing before she won, and came to the Minnesota legislature. She was tenacious. And once elected, her talent was immediately obvious to her caucus, and by her second term, she was already mounting and growing in leadership. And by the time she was elected Speaker, she had a remarkable record as a negotiator, an honest broker, someone who was true to her principles, even when she had to make tough choices. Melissa's leadership during the 2023 legislative session of the Minnesota legislature was nothing short of historic. Much has been written about the great accomplishments of this legislative session in Minnesota, Mr. President, but I think an underappreciated part of this was that this remarkable session didn't just happen in one short period. It happened because of years and years and years of work by legislators and organizers and activists building the support and the consensus. And Melissa was a part of that work from the very beginning. The success of that legislature and that legislative session came because of her ability to see an opportunity and to meet the moment and meet it with deftness and courage, and the result has been transformational to Minnesota. She always believed that you can make a difference for people if you work at it, and she did. And because of her leadership, more than 13.5 million more Minnesota students get a healthy and free breakfast and lunch in 2024. Minnesota is on track to eliminate all lead water service lines by 2023, thanks to Melissa. More than 65,000 Minnesotans were automatically registered to vote. And Minnesota, of course, is the state, we're very proud of this, with the second highest voter turnout in the 2024 presidential election, and the highest youth voter turnout by far. And starting next year, Mr. President, working Minnesotans who are starting or growing or caring for their families will have access to paid leave, thanks to Melissa. In short, millions of Minnesotans are better off because of the work that she did. Her record of accomplishment is so extensive, it's hard to capture it all in just a few short minutes. And so it is so bitter to realize that she was only 55. She had so many more contributions to make, so much, as Melissa would say, don't get carried away. I was just going to do my work. I was going to work as hard as I could. And so it is bitter for us that her life was taken in this way, and it will now be up to all of us to carry on these fights, and I will miss her leadership and her friendship as our state navigates these uncertain times. Mr. President, I look around this Senate chamber and I see legislators who, like Melissa, understand that the job of a legislature and a legislator is to help fix things, not just talk about fixing things, to lift up people who need help, to build opportunity, and to use the power of our connections to one another to build a better, stronger, more fair community. And I hope my colleagues will take heart and inspiration from Melissa's example and rededicate ourselves to what it means to be a legislator, working across lines of difference to solve problems for the people who sent us here. I want to just also close with a suggestion from Melissa and Mark's beloved children, Sophie and Colin, to all of us in Minnesota just yesterday. And it is in the spirit of Melissa's directness and down-to-earthness. She said, if you would like to honor the memory of Mark and Melissa, please consider the following. Plant a tree, visit a local park, and make use of the amenities, especially a bike trail. Pet a dog. A golden retriever is ideal, but any will do. Tell your loved ones a cheesy dad joke and laugh about it. Bake something, bread from Mark or a cake from Melissa, and share it with someone. Try a new hobby and enjoy learning something. Stand up for what you believe in, especially if that thing is justice and peace. May the memory of Melissa and Mark be a blessing to all who knew and loved them, and may John and Yvette have a speedy recovery, and may we all find a way to recover and be better after these terrible attacks. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.